I've always been the quiet one in the room, the one who observes more than she speaks, who collects thoughts like seashells, fragile, tucked away, waiting for the right moment to shine. From as far back as I can remember, I wanted to be a writer. Not a best-selling author, not famous, just a woman who could string together the kind of words that made people feel seen. But dreams like mine don't survive in every household, especially not in the one I built with Nate Dot we met in college. He was loud, charming, full of ambition, the kind of man who could hold court in any room and often did. I was drawn to him because he made life feel bigger. At first, he loved that I was creative. He said it balanced him out, that I grounded him. I believed him, but that admiration slowly soured into something else, something quieter, something colder. Dot at first. He'd chuckle when I mentioned wanting to write a book. You and every other girl with a Pinterest board, he said once, laughing as he scrolled through his phone. I laughed too back then, out of discomfort, not humor. I didn't know how to say, that hurt, without sounding sensitive. And God knows, I'd already been called that enough. Eventually, he stopped pretending to entertain the idea at all. When I brought up writing during dinner one night, he didn't look up from his plate. Emma, he said, chewing, why don't you focus on something real for a change? Real, like his job in sales. Like our mortgage. Like his gym schedule. So I stopped talking about writing. I still did it, in secret, in spirals and notebooks hidden in my nightstand. Sometimes at 3 a.m., when the apartment was silent and his snoring filled the space, I'd pull out my laptop and let the words pour out like rain on a dry sidewalk. It wasn't for money or recognition, just survival. Just something that still belonged to me. When we moved into our 2-bedroom condo, the one he insisted on, even though it stretched us financially, I asked if I could turn the guest room into a small writing nook. He laughed. Not maliciously, just dismissively. You're cute when you dream like that, he said, kissing my forehead. The room became his workout space, and I became small. I stopped buying myself books. I stopped journaling in front of him. I stopped calling myself a writer, even in my head. I started calling it a little hobby too. But here's the thing about dreams. You can suffocate them, mock them, bury them under laundry and gaslighting and tax returns, but they don't die. They adapt. They grow underground. And one day, if you're lucky, they bloom. I didn't know that yet, though. Back then, I was just Emma, the quiet wife of a loud man. I have forgotten what my voice sounded like when it wasn't filtered through someone else's comfort. I had traded in my passion for peace, or at least the illusion of it. And Nate thought he had me all figured out. Soft-spoken, reliable, predictable. The kind of woman who knew how to stay in her place. He wasn't cruel. That's what made it harder. It's easy to hate a villain who throws punches. It's harder to name the ones who disarm you with jokes, who chip away at you with grins and eye rolls and, babe, be serious, but 1,000 paper cuts still bleed. And I was starting to feel lightheaded. Looking back now, I can trace the exact moment something inside me began to shift. It wasn't dramatic. It was an ordinary Tuesday. He came home late, tossed his gym bag on the couch, and saw me typing. Still doing that little blog thing? He asked. No, I said, without looking up. I'm writing something new. He laughed. And something in me cracked wide open. He didn't see it. He didn't hear it. But I did. It was the sound of my own patience expiring, and it was the beginning of everything. The night was supposed to be simple. Just a few couples, dinner, wine, laughter. Nate liked hosting. He said it made us look like we had it all together. And we did on the surface. The kind of condo with sleek lighting and marble countertops. Spotify playlists humming in the background. Wine decanted just enough to seem effortless. I had spent the whole day preparing the space, setting the table just so arranging flowers from the local market, cooking Nate's favorite pasta because he insisted takeout would look lazy. He played the charming host perfectly, topping off glasses, clinking bottles, making everyone feel like they belonged, and I smiled through it. Because that's what you do when you're the supportive wife of a man like Nate. You glide. You laugh at the right times. You become scenery. Until he made me the punchline. It was after dessert, when everyone was loosened by wine and stories were turning bold. Someone asked me what I'd been up to lately. It was a harmless question, the kind meant to fill a lull in conversation. But I hesitated because I knew what would come next. Before I could answer, Nate jumped in. "She's been working on her epic novel," he said, lifting his glass. "It's about feelings and flowers and whatever women write about these days. Double quotes, laughter, real, full-throated laughter from the table. I looked around. No one else seemed to find it cruel. Just funny. Silly Emma and her silly little hobby. She's gonna be the next J.K. Rowling," he added with a wink. "Without the castle. Or the money. Or, the readers." More laughter. I felt the heat crawl up my neck, a slow, humiliating burn that reached my ears. I tried to laugh along. I really did. But something inside me wouldn't let the sound come out. Not this time, because it wasn't just a joke. It was a declaration. A reminder of how small he saw me. I picked at the edge of my napkin, blinking hard. Nobody noticed. Nobody ever really did. The conversation moved on. People shifted to vacations, office gossip, someone's new kitchen renovation. Nate kissed my cheek like nothing had happened. I excused myself to the bathroom and stood in front of the mirror, gripping the sink. I wasn't crying, but I wanted to scream, not because of what he said, but because it wasn't new. It was just the first time he said it out loud, where the echo could bounce off other people's laughter and come back sharper. He had taken my dream, the one I still nurtured in the privacy of 3 a.m. writing sessions, and made it a circus act. Stared at my reflection. My makeup was perfect. My dress was elegant. My smile was nowhere to be found. That was the moment something shifted. I didn't make a scene. I didn't slam the door. I didn't even bring it up later that night. I let him sleep peacefully, let him snore beside me like he hadn't just ripped the skin off my spirit in front of our friends. But I didn't. Forget. I stopped showing him my writing after that. I stopped mentioning plot lines or asking him to read a paragraph. I stopped needing him to believe in me because something broke open inside me that night. Not something fragile. Something fierce. For years, I thought I needed his permission, his approval, his cheerleading. But what I needed was silence. And in that silence, I began to build, not for revenge, not to prove him wrong, but to remember what it felt like to belong to myself. And it was the beginning of everything. I started waking up before the sun, not because I wanted to, but because it was the only time the house was mine. When silence wasn't a punishment, but a permission, I would slip out of bed quietly, careful not to wake Nate. The sound of his deep, even breathing was almost soothing now, like the ticking of a clock I no longer answered to. I'd wrap myself in an old robe, the one with the threadbare sleeves, and tiptoe to the dining table. There, in the glow of a single lamp, I would write. Not for hours, just for enough. Enough to feel like I hadn't completely disappeared. At first, it was just journaling. Then scenes. Then characters started forming. Stubborn, sharp women who never asked permission. I didn't know where they came from, but I knew they weren't afraid of being laughed at. I didn't tell Nate. He thought I was going through a mood. He'd say things like, "You should sleep more, you're cranky lately," or "Don't burn yourself out chasing fairy tales." I'd smile and nod. And then I'd wake up the next day at 5 a.m. again. I joined online writing forums under a pen name. I read blog posts about structure, arcs, dialogue. I downloaded free PDFs about publishing. I found strangers on the internet who believed in stories more than the people I shared a bed with. It wasn't glamorous. Most days, I deleted more than I wrote. I doubted myself constantly. I second-guessed every sentence. But still, I kept going. Nate never noticed the notebooks piling up, or the drafts saved under fake names on my laptop. He didn't ask questions, and I stopped offering answers. When he laughed with his friends about aspiring artists who thought they were special, I didn't flinch. When he rolled his eyes at indie books with those covers, I didn't defend them. I just kept writing. My defiance wasn't loud. It was ink and quiet mornings. It was page after page, stitched together in solitude. It was survival. And slowly, the story came to life. It was about a woman who was underestimated by everyone, including herself. About love that turned controlling. About reclaiming a voice that had been mocked into silence. It wasn't just fiction. It was an exhale. When I finished the first draft, I cried. Not because it was perfect, it wasn't, but because I had finished something. For myself, I didn't print it out. I didn't celebrate. I saved it to a flash drive, slipped it into an old jewelry box, and hid it behind books on a dusty shelf. My treasure. My rebellion. And then I began again. Draft 2 was better, tighter, stronger, braver. I started submitting anonymously to small contests. I got rejections. Dozens of them. Some kind, some brutal. Each one was a paper cut, but each one was proof I existed. Then, one day, an email. We loved your voice. We want to talk. I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't tell Nate. He was in the kitchen, muttering about the coffee machine. I watched him from the hallway, the way he barked at the toaster like it owed him something. I felt no urge to share the news, because this wasn't for him. It was for the version of me who had swallowed too many jokes, who had made herself small at too many dinners, who had doubted that her words mattered. I pressed reply. The first rejection didn't sting as much as I thought it. What doubted arrived on a Tuesday morning, just a line or two of polite dismissal. Not the right fit for us at this time. I read it 3 times, waiting for the pain to punch me. But all I felt was breathless pride, because it meant someone had read my words. The next dozen rejections came faster. Some were form letters. Some were colder. One simply said, pass, no explanation. No softness. That one got to me. I stared at it for an hour, letting it echo all the old voices I thought I'd silenced. You're not good enough. You're not serious. You're not meant for more, but something had shifted in me. I wasn't the girl who took jokes quietly anymore. I was the woman who wrote through sunrises, who crafted stories from dust. So I opened a new document and began again. Each time I revised, I changed more than words. My sentences grew sharper. My pacing tightened. My protagonist, once hesitant, now walked into scenes with fire in her veins. She was betrayed just like I had been, undervalued, dismissed, but unlike me. She didn't wait for permission to rise. She fought, and I realized I was writing her braver, because I was becoming braver. The more I wrote, the more the story stopped being fiction. It was a map of my survival, a mirror, a manifesto. I wasn't just telling a tale of heartbreak and recovery. I was scripting my own rescue. Nate still didn't know. He'd glance at my screen and scoff. Still on that book thing? He'd say between mouthfuls of cereal. Hope you're not wasting too much time. I'd smile and nod. What he didn't see was that every night I sat down, I was building an empire he'd never be invited into. Revisions turned into revelations. Scenes I once tiptoed around now thundered. Dialogue was no longer timid. My characters stopped whispering, and so did I. One night, I printed the latest draft and sat with it on my lap. The weight of it was real. Paper, yes, but also power. This was what persistence looked like. Not glamorous, not easy, but alive. I researched publishers, contests, hybrid presses. I networked quietly. I sent queries under my pen name, always with my heart in my throat, always knowing it could be another no, but every no was softer now, because I knew something Nate didn't. Rejection isn't failure. Quitting is. I built a wall of rejections on my office wall. Taped them up like medals. They reminded me I was still in the arena. And one morning, the silence broke. An email from an editor. She'd read my manuscript. She loved it. She saw herself in it. She believed in its message. She wanted to talk publishing. I didn't cry. I just exhaled the breath I'd been holding for years. That day, Nate complained that dinner was late. I made it anyway. Stirred the pasta, passed the salt, smiled at the same man who once laughed at my dreams. He still didn't know, but soon he would, because the book wasn't just done, it was ready. Emma was folding laundry when her phone rang. It was an unknown number, and for a second she almost didn't answer. But something intuition maybe made her pick it up. Double quotes. Hi, is this Emma? I mean, E.J. Quinn? The voice on the other end asked, hesitantly. Emma's breath caught. That was the name she had submitted her manuscript under. Her pen name. Her private self. Yes, she said, voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. This is Marcy from Birch and Bone Publishing. We've read your manuscript. The woman who walked away. The woman paused, almost like she wanted to build suspense. We're obsessed. Emma sat down slowly on the bed, laundry tumbling from her arms. Marcy continued, her words pouring out in a blur of praise and enthusiasm. They loved the protagonist's voice, the pacing, the pain that felt so real. They wanted to publish it soon. There would be an advance, nothing massive, but respectable, and a team to polish the manuscript. They believed in the story. In her, Emma's mouth moved, answering questions, nodding to agreements. But her soul was dancing in a quiet, reverent circle. When she hung up, she didn't scream. She didn't jump or cry. She simply lay back on the bed, hands folded on her chest, staring at the ceiling. This wasn't a dream anymore. It was real. Downstairs, she could hear Nate yelling at the TV again. Some sports game, some argument over nothing. He'd just gotten off the phone with the bank, furious that their joint account was tight again. He hadn't asked Emma about her day. He rarely did. She stood, quietly placing the phone on the dresser, and went downstairs. Everything okay? Nate asked without looking away from the screen. Yeah, Emma replied. Just laundry. She looked at him, really looked at him. The man who once told her that writing was a waste of time, that dreams were for people with rich parents or nothing better to do. He'd laughed at her over dinner once when she said she wanted to publish a novel, called her his little artist, mocked her in front of friends like her ambition was a punchline, and now? Now he was hunched over a bowl of chips, barking at a referee through the screen, completely unaware that something seismic had shifted upstairs. Emma made tea and returned to her laptop. She opened the manuscript and scrolled through it, not to edit, but to see it again with new eyes. The words she once doubted suddenly looked different, braver, sharper. The protagonist, Rowan, was a woman who left behind a life of smallness, who built her escape in silence, who became someone no one saw coming. Just like Emma, she didn't tell Nate about the book, or the deal, or the upcoming edits. She created a new email account just for correspondence. She signed the contract electronically, heart pounding. She printed out the pages, signed with blue ink, and mailed them from the post office 3 blocks away, her secret walk. Nate asked her once, Casually, what she was working on so intently lately. Freelance stuff, she'd answered. Just some editing gigs. He didn't press stop, why would he? He hadn't read a single thing she'd written in years. He didn't know her pen name. He didn't even know her favorite character. But soon the world would. When the first check arrived, a modest advance, wired directly to a new account she had opened months ago, Emma stared at the number for a long time. Not because it was huge, but because it was hers, authored, earned. She used part of it to fix the leaky kitchen sink herself. Nate praised her for saving money. "Smart girl," he said, patting her head like a child. She smiled. She began waking earlier. She started working with her editor, revising chapters, sharpening scenes. At night, she watched webinars on author branding and listened to podcasts about book launches. Every word was a rebellion. Every sentence was her exit strategy. And the best part? No one saw it coming. In a world that demanded she be small, Emma had chosen to grow quietly, like roots beneath concrete. And now, the ground had started to crack. The man who said she would never be anything more than a cute little housewife with a journal. He would never know what was coming next. Not yet. She wasn't done writing. She was just getting started. The morning Emma received her first royalty check, the sun barely filtered through the blinds. It wasn't a life-changing amount yet, but it was the first time she looked at her laptop and saw numbers that made her breath hitch. 4 figures. From her words. From her story. From her voice, which had once been a whisper so buried beneath Nate's criticism. She wasn't sure it existed anymore. She didn't cry. She just smiled, closed her eyes, and whispered, "Thank you." The reviews had started pouring in a week earlier. She read each one with trembling hands. It's like she cracked, opened her ribcage, and wrote from the marrow. "This book feels like therapy and fire all at once. Whoever this anonymous author is, she just spoke my entire truth." Emma didn't need to say a word. The world had spoken for her. She opened a separate bank account at a new institution across town. A clean slate. She used her maiden name and her pen name interchangeably on the paperwork. One for the heart, one for the world. The money trickled in, then surged. The second check was more than double the first. She'd underestimated what healing, honest writing could do, especially for women who had swallowed their worth in silence for years. Meanwhile, Nate sat at the kitchen table, groaning over the electric bill. "They're robbing us blind," he muttered, sipping cold coffee. "We're barely keeping up," Emma hummed in agreement. Setting down a bag of groceries she paid for 10 times over, but let him believe were purchased on store credit. Nate didn't ask why the fridge was suddenly fuller, or why Emma's clothes fit better newer. He didn't notice that she no longer winced when he joked about her little scribbles. He chalked up her glow to yoga. Maybe cleaner eating. It never crossed his mind that it could be self-worth. At night, she'd curl up with her laptop, answering emails from readers across the globe. Women wrote paragraphs, whole essays. Some said her book gave them the courage to walk away from toxic relationships. Others said it helped them stay on their own terms with boundaries. Some just said thank you. One message stayed with her. "You put into words what I couldn't say out loud. I feel seen. I feel strong." She read it 10 times. Then she forwarded it to her editor, no subject line. Her publisher asked if she wanted to do press. "No," she said. "Not yet. This was sacred." This was hers. Emma walked a fine line. She stayed quiet, not out of fear, but strategy. Letting Nate believe she was still fragile, still scrambling, gave her freedom. It gave her clarity. The man who once told her to stop daydreaming and be realistic now relied on her silent, invisible labor to make his life easier. The irony wasn't lost on her. He asked once how they managed to afford dinner out that week. She smiled. "Coupons," he laughed. You've always been thrifty. She sipped her wine and thought. Not thrifty. Strategic. She began planning her next book. This one would be about rebuilding, about women who rise not from fury, but from grace sharpened into steel. She already had the title. The Quiet Ones When Last, and she was just getting started. Nate wasn't a particularly observant man, but even he had his limits. It started with the groceries. Organic, fresh, imported. The kind of items Emma used to put back on the shelf with a tight smile and a glance at the price tag. Now they sat neatly arranged in the fridge, without coupons, without apologies. Did these go on sale? He asked once, holding a carton of almond milk that cost more than a steak dinner. Emma barely looked up from her tea. I had a few reward points. Nothing big. He shrugged, already forgetting the question, but a seed had been planted. Next came the clothes. Emma had never been flashy. Her wardrobe was built for practicality, neutral tones, clearance rack staples, nothing that ever begged for attention. But recently, there was a shift. Her outfits looked effortless, not extravagant, but deliberate. Soft linen shirts, dresses with clean lines, leather flats that clearly weren't from a discount bin. Nate tilted his head one morning. Did you go shopping? Emma glanced down at her blouse. Just needed something that fit better, he grunted. Didn't know better meant expensive, she smiled. Didn't know you were an expert on fashion. Still, he didn't push. He never did. He had grown used to Emma being predictable, quiet, agreeable, low maintenance. He was beginning to realize she wasn't any of those things anymore. The moment everything snapped into focus was a week later. Nate was rifling through the mail, looking for a sports catalog he'd subscribed to. Instead, he found something glossy, thick paper, high-end. A brochure. It was tucked between a utility bill and an invitation to a neighborhood barbecue. He almost tossed it until the photo caught his eye. A beachfront villa, white sand, glass walls, infinity pool. The title read, Coastal Freedom, private listings for private buyers. Nate's breath hitched. He flipped it open. Every page was more decadent than the last. One property boasted a wine cellar and a spa wing. Another claimed uninterrupted ocean views from the master suite. A third had a price listed, $2.3 million. His stomach twisted. He looked for Emma's name, nothing. But then he saw the business card clipped inside. It was addressed to E.H. Whitmore. Nate's palms went clammy. Emma's middle name was Hope. He waited until dinner. The silence was heavier than usual. He watched her, fork moving gracefully from plate to mouth, calm, content, glowing. Finally, he couldn't take it. Hey, found something in the mail today. She glanced up. He pulled the brochure from under the table and slid it across the wood. Emma didn't flinch. Her eyes flicked down, then back to him. I thought we were broke, he said. How are you getting beach house ads in your name? She took a slow sip of water. I've been thinking about the future, he blinked. The future? She leaned in slightly. Don't you ever get tired of scraping by? Nate laughed nervously. Emma, this is serious. A beach house. She tilted her head. Why not? Because we're not millionaires, she smiled. Aren't we? That stopped him cold. He stared, confused. What's going on? Emma stood and picked up the brochure. You know what's funny? You used to laugh at my writing. You said I was wasting my time. That's not what this is about. No? She tucked the brochure into her bag. Then what is this about? He opened his mouth, but no words came. She was composed, untouchable. Are you hiding something? He finally asked, voice smaller now. Emma looked at him, really looked. I'm not hiding. I'm building. With that, she walked into the hallway, leaving Nate with more questions than he had answers. And for the first time in their marriage, She liked it that way. It was a Saturday morning when Nate finally cornered her. Emma had just returned from a solo walk, carrying a coffee she hadn't offered to share. She'd been doing that more lately, disappearing for hours, smiling without explanation, coming back glowing. It rattled him. He sat on the couch, arms crossed. The glossy beach house brochure spread across the coffee table like an accusation. "We need to talk," he said. Emma set down her keys. "About? You know what?" His voice trembled, more from confusion than anger. "I need answers." Emma sighed gently and sat across from him. "Okay, ask. The house. The clothes. The money. Where is it coming from?" She folded her hands. "From my book." Nate blinked. "Your book?" "Yes, the one you used to talk about all the time. The one I thought you gave up on." Emma didn't answer that. She simply reached into her bag and pulled out a hardcover book. The title was embossed in gold. The author? E.H. Whitmore. Nate took the book like it might burn him. "You wrote this?" She nodded. "I did." He flipped through the pages. This is real. This isn't a hobby." Emma smiled softly. "It never was." He stared at her. "Why didn't you tell me?" Her expression didn't change. "You never asked or listened." Nate opened his mouth to protest, but the memory of all the dinners where he talked over her, all the weekends where she quietly disappeared into her notebook while he watched TV, all the times she whispered, "I'm writing something new," only to be met with silence or smirks. It all came rushing back. "You kept this from me," he said, voice lower. Emma tilted her head. "Did I? Or did I just stop offering what was always ignored?" He leaned back, stunned. "I submitted it under a pen name," she continued. "I signed a deal, then another, and then the reviews came in. The money started trickling in, then flooding. I opened a separate account. I paid off my car, paid off your debt, paid for that fridge you said we'd figure out eventually. You did all of that without telling me." Emma's voice was calm. "You used to laugh at the idea of me writing, remember? At Jenny's dinner party, you made a joke that my fantasy novel was just me daydreaming my way out of budgeting." Everyone laughed, including you. Nate looked away. "I realized something that night," she said. "You didn't see me as capable." "Not really. You left me small, quiet, manageable. That's not fair." Emma stood. "You're right. It's not fair. It's not fair that I had to become invisible before I could become free." He looked up, wounded. "So what now?" "I don't know," she said honestly. "I haven't decided." He scoffed. "You're just going to walk away?" Emma stepped closer. "You already did. A long time ago. Every time you dismissed my words. Every time you rolled your eyes when I brought up my dreams. You left. I just stayed behind, pretending that was enough." Silence stretched between them like a chasm. He finally asked, "So, all of this was to get back at me?" Emma looked him dead in the eyes. "No, this wasn't revenge. This was resurrection." She picked up the book, ran a hand across its spine. "You were part of the story," she added. "Just not the ending." Then she turned and walked into her study, closing the door gently behind her, leaving Nate alone, finally realizing that the woman he underestimated had quietly written herself into a life he was no longer the main character in. Emma's mornings started earlier now, not out of obligation, but intention. Coffee brewed as she reviewed her itinerary, a radio interview, a virtual book club, then a flight to Chicago for a literary panel. Her life was in motion, full, vibrant, blooming. Meanwhile, Nate sat at the kitchen island, scrolling half-heartedly through job listings he didn't want. The man who once mocked Emma's dreams now lived in a house paid for by them. He didn't say it, but it hung in the air between them, a quiet resentment wrapped in embarrassment. She still made breakfast, still asked, "How did you sleep?" But the tone had changed. It wasn't submissive sweetness, it was polite distance. They weren't partners anymore. Not really. Just people occupying the same space, stitched together by legalities and faded vows. Nate had no idea what to do with himself. He cleaned sometimes, tried cooking once. Mostly he stayed out of her way. Emma never gloated. That was the part that unsettled him most. No, I told you so. No rubbing success in his face. Just quiet dominance, effortless and earned. One afternoon, Emma returned from a book signing in Portland to find Nate watching her interview on YouTube. "You didn't tell me you were going live," he said, as if hurt. She smiled faintly. "Did you want me to?" He shrugged. "You used to tell me everything." Emma placed her bag down. "I used to think that mattered." He looked at her, searching for the woman he once underestimated, the one he thought would always orbit around his comfort. But she wasn't there. In her place stood someone sharper, bolder, untouchable. The balance had shifted, and neither of them could deny it. She brought home the checks now. She made the decisions. When she spoke, others listened. And Nate, once the loudest voice in the room, had become background noise in her story. He'd laugh when she wrote. Now he folded her laundry, and Emma, she just kept writing. The bookstore was warm with energy, readers lined up, books clutched to their chests, eyes bright with anticipation. Emma sat at the signing table beneath a banner bearing her pen name in bold gold letters. The woman on the poster looked like her, only freer, more certain, lit from within. It took her a second to realize that woman was her. Each reader brought a piece of her old self to the surface. One woman said, "Your book made me leave my dead-end job." Another whispered, "I cried when your character chose herself." Emma thanked them all. But inside, a deeper gratitude brewed, not for their praise, but for their understanding. She had written her way out of silence, out of dismissal, out of him. Nate sat in the parking lot, engine off, watching through the bookstore window. He'd insisted on driving her, saying it was easier this way, that they both knew what it really was, distance disguised as duty. He was no longer the man at the center of her world. He was the passenger now. She didn't need him, and worse, he knew it. Back inside, Emma signed the last copy and rose to leave. The manager hugged her, the staff applauded, and strangers took selfies with her. Not once did she think of him. Not really. Her story had long since left him behind. In the car, Nate looked up from his phone. "Busy night," he muttered. Emma nodded. "Always is now." They drove in silence for a while, the city lights flickering across the windshield like applause. "You ever think about writing a sequel?" he asked, eyes on the road. She turned to him. "I already did." He didn't get it. Of course he didn't, because what she didn't say was this. She had written her sequel not in pages, but in choices. In walking into rooms he told her she'd never belong in buying her own flowers, in paying her own bills, in building a life where her voice, once ignored, echoed in bookstores and libraries and hearts. She had written him out long before the book deal. He was a side character, a footnote. A warning. Later that night, as he fell asleep early, bored and disconnected, Emma sat on the balcony of their rented condo, champagne in hand, laptop open. A blank document stared back at her. Inviting. She began typing. "He told me I was too sensitive, too soft, too silly to ever be taken seriously. So I stopped talking and started writing. I didn't need to scream. I just needed to be read." She paused, smiled, and continued. No rage. No revenge. Just evolution. She didn't need to prove anything anymore. She was living proof, and somewhere in the quiet just before midnight, she whispered to herself, not bitter, not broken, just free. "You laughed at my dream." Now I live in it. The screen glowed. The world slept on, and Emma wrote on.